this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this. I haven't really taught much on this stuff for years. So when I was asked by James and a few other people to do it, I was like, yeah, why not? This is something I've been privately practicing some of this stuff for years, and I've just never really taught much about it. So anyway, get ready to remove the blinkers from your eyes and to start to see a new way of being. So, who's here because you're, Shayla, hello, handsome. Hello, Shayla. You say all the right words. So who's here because the whole government mandates and the things that are going on have just got you a little bit like nervous and like, I really got to get myself empowered pretty fast before the government's kind of used me as a bitch for experimentation or whatever other nasty things they want to do to me. Yeah, a few of you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure the government have got plenty of wonderful surprises planned. I mean, as I told someone, they said, do you think worse things are coming? I said, well, they basically coercively vaccinated a whole population and got away with it. So one of two things will happen. They're going to wake up one day and think, shit, that was a bit naughty of us, and get up and apologize and say, we really shouldn't have done that. And then it all ends, or they're going to try something else and keep trying stuff. So one would hope that people are empowered enough to have woken up to realize that if you're not going to push back now or get empowered now and awaken, you very likely never actually will. So if you don't get really awakened now and find your power and find your strength, more likely than not, you just won't be. You know, it's really that simple. I mean, it's been what's happened, of course, in the last little while has been some of the most appalling stuff, you know. Yeah, look, my opinions, unfortunately, have so far come to fruition. And I said to someone, this is one thing I would be really happy if I was wrong on some of it. I really would be. So this is something I don't have a lot of joy on being right about. It's just, yeah, look, unfortunately, when governments can do this kind of stuff and they've been able to get away with so long doing the kind of stuff that they're actually doing, then you can pretty much rest assured that there's many more things coming ahead. And there's a very, baby steps to the cashless system. Yep, I would agree with that. So yeah, look, it's just all the stuff that's been told about coming to fruition. So really, it's a good time to awaken. It's a very good time to get empowered and, to find your strength. So obviously, we're not giving legal advice, financial advice, or anything like that. And if you want to go that, you should go into the system and pay for it and see someone. So what you'll be learning today, in summary, there's a few different things. And look, some of this is my opinion. Some of this is expanding a little bit beyond the kind of stuff I said to date. So yeah, there's certainly plenty of things that are happening right now in the world, as you can see, that we really do need to start to do it. So definitely these centralized bank digital currencies. To me, that's just always made sense. I don't see why the central bank won't eventually bring that in, seeing as they've got facial recognition, they've got everything else coming in. So it's just hard to imagine anything else coming in. So other than that, without a very genuine change or pushback. So we're covering all this kind of stuff. So let's just start off with this thing called the straw man. Now, who's heard of this whole idea of a straw man, or the kind of fictional entities, another word? So fictional entities, probably a better word than the straw man, but yeah, it's just basically a kind of fiction. One of the things to realize first and foremost about most law in our system is most of it is actually fiction. If you think about it, like when you say who basically you got a liability, like you got a speeding fine, but who do you actually have a liability to? The state. Who's the state? Well, it's just kind of not really anything. In fact, now it's a corporation, but once upon a time, it wasn't really anything. So the state is basically just this thing. So most laws are fiction. Like when you set up a company trust to go into the asset protection system, the company doesn't exist, so to speak. It's a fictional thing existing in the etheric realm. most of your already kind of ethos. If you got shares in BHP, well, it's just this kind of idea worth $20. It's an idea. You go, yeah, my property's now worth $1 million. It was worth 800,000 before. Like, yeah, that's fine. It's just an idea. It's like playing Monopoly. And at some stage, the Monopoly game ends, the banks end the game, and you start a new one. And that's what's been happening every 90 years on average. The banks end the game, there's a crash, there's a reset, they start again. So really, there's not likely to be anything much different. So the game will end, and it just sees and it goes back to the bank, goes back to the system, and they start again. And those who haven't prepared and got planned for it will be left without anything and have to start the game all over again. So that's the best way to think about the system, so to speak. So the idea of the straw man, so to speak, the fictional entity, is Warren Stewart Black, which is my middle name, after my mum's dad, my grandfather, or Warren Stewart Black in capital letters. And which one's actually my real name? Now, keep in mind, it's very important to understand, it's through ignorance of the law that people basically get messed up. Through ignorance, people perish. There's an ancient scripture in the Bible which says that ignorance of the law is the biggest reason why people eventually perish and get really caught out, because they just don't actually realize stuff. And ignorance costs many people in COVID, people not knowing their rights, assuming things will be okay, not taking the time to really get things worked out, left people very vulnerable. And I'm sure some of you may have been caught out like that as well. Just really not understanding your rights, so to speak. So the natural man, or which is Warren Black, or woman versus person, which is a fictional entity. So is this actually true? The short answer is this is actually true. Now, I was involved many years ago in various off-the-grid movements and underground, and met people who used to be secret agents, and read and managed to get hold of ancient legal dictionaries and Blackstone's legal commentaries, and found to my complete astonishment on the whole thing was, was with my absolute complete astonishment with the whole thing was that I was like, wow, this was actually true. I saw very different legal dictionaries going back many years ago compared to now. And even reading the ancient common law legal commentaries, I was like, okay, so basically we're under a corporate law system. We're not actually under really any common law whatsoever. So I was like, oh, that's a bit rough, so to speak. And that got me really started and got me really moving. So it's distinguishing the commercial admiralty person from law from the natural man or woman or common law arena. So that's the basic idea. So if you notice that on many government documents and birth certificates and various things like that, they use the word person a lot. Like if you read the Income Tax Assessment Act, you will see that, the word person. If you read the mandates, it was like a person. The new Directors' Idea Law talks about a person, so it shall be liable a person. Now, then when you go and read acts interpretations, acts and various acts, they kind of go through all various shenanigans and things like that. But ultimately, it is definitely referring to a fictional entity. And the reason why is, by and large, that any kind of law you have to consent to. That's one of the basic, what's called 10 maxims of uniform commercial law. You've got to actually consent to it. That's the basic idea. Now, in being in a community with certain groups of people, by implication, you may consent to it. Like if I live in a family or growing up and choose to live here and be married to a certain woman, and we have certain agreements, then yeah, we by and large consent to that. But the idea is that you consent to it. And you should have the ability, for example, to go and create your own community, create your own world, and operate independently from what's called decentralized corporate government, which is by and large what's really come into the world and become the norm. So that's actually ancient common law, but we're so far removed from it now, it's almost hard to fathom any different reality. So I can remember the Australian Taxation Office when I was first told that it wasn't actually a legal entity, and I'm like, huh? And I remember speaking to guys who in America who'd gone to the law library. We went back and researched all the Income Tax Assessment Act, and to my complete astonishment, I'm like, shit, there's no one in the Tax Act really that requires you to pay tax as an individual. It's only as a person, as a corporation. That was my conclusion as we went through the legislation. Then I remember seeing with my own eyes the legal document that somehow got leaked by mistake. I saw it, and unfortunately I lost my copy of it, but actually said that the Australian Taxation Office was not a legal entity, and it was Australian government solicitor legal opinion that was actually given to the Solicitor General and given within the ATO. But actually they admitted it wasn't a legal entity. So basically they just simply were a ghost or shadow entity. And of course that got me thinking, well, who the heck are they representing? And from what my limited ability to find out was they were basically IMS Debt Collection Agency, and it went back to the 1915 Income Tax Act, and which came out of the war. And in the creature of Jekyll Island, Edward Griffin talks about how in 1913, on the 24th of December, when all the congressmen went home for Christmas, a few very naughty congressmen got together on Jekyll Island. We all got together in Congress with some people who met on Jekyll Island, like Rothschild and a few of those guys. They passed the Federal Reserve Bank, and part of the deal was to bring in the income tax to make sure that the nation could pay the interest payments by collecting it off its citizens that were their corporate property, so to speak. So basically turning everyone into a group of slaves. And it's really interesting. When I first found this out, I keep in mind, I was a lawyer at the time, so you can just imagine how scrambled it was. And I was just like, what on earth do I do with this? And it kind of went further, and I started to realize how much they actually use words to entrap, that we were living in a whole place where the pen is really mightier than the sword. That was one of the reasons that these guys were willing to teach me, even though I was a lawyer, because they could see that I was awakened, as they put it to me. And they said to me, you actually have an advantage. I said, why? And they said, because the pen is mightier than the sword. So in this new world that we're living in, so you're the master of the pen. So that's what they said to me. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they said, yeah. So they said, we're happy to teach you that kind of stuff. So the pen really is mightier than the sword, so to speak. So so there's various principles. So yeah, the pen mightier than the sword. So very interesting. So Damien, yes. So I'm curious if you got your actual, there's probably a link on the Australian Taxation Office, but yes, it's oh wow, you got the letter on there. Yeah, I just saw it. That's pretty good. So yeah, Damien just posted the link. This was the letter I lost a copy of, but yeah, I had this back in the early 2000s where it was to my friend Doug Cameron, who I knew pretty well through some missionary work we were involved in. But yes, kind of where the actual letter went through and confirmed that it was created as a branch, and Extensive Church failed to identify any document confirming that it was actually set up or anything of that kind, and never officially gazetted. So it gets really fun. As you can see here, if you really want to get into this, you can have an awful lot of fun. And if you really, really want to get through the next few years, you want to become a master of the pen. And interestingly enough, in fact, I've had so many people ask me, I'm going to start a proper common law legal rights training in terms of everything from vaccine mandates to, social credits to, director's ID, to stopping bullying in schools, to stopping people chasing you for money, to stopping mortgages being chasing you and things like that. And just basically, stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's interested in that, but if you are, just mention text that you are, because I'm just curious if you are, and it'll give me a bit of an idea if we should make sure everyone here knows about the course when we do it. But yeah, we're going to be running it, and there's we're going to be going into everything about bullying, workplace harassment, stopping government. I mean, I'm just going to have some fun. I'm going to be bringing out all my best stuff, and it'll be a online half-day workshop to start. Then it'll be a 13-week training, and then there'll be for those who particularly want to meet up and have a bit of a private meeting one-on-one, or not one-on-one, but in a small group. We're going to have a small group webinar over in Perth where we'll sit down and basically have the time of our life. So yeah, no, it's going to be fun, because you do have to become a master of the pen. And I remember when the mandates happened, I knew I was going to be fine, because I knew that I was a master of the pen. So all I would just do was go through, pull out all my common law, strawman knowledge, all my legal knowledge, everything, had to pull everything out of the archives, read all the mandates, and I literally got myself through it, got everything by following it, and by and large moved on as normal. And it's something I really want to empower people, because I've always had this dream to empower such a mighty revolution in my country that, yeah, people will just, that, yeah, we'll see changes and see things get sorted out. So, you know, and with ignorance, people perish. So understanding contract and civil law versus common law. The Know Your Rights group put up a quite useful one here, where their top part represents kind of what common law and how it's meant to work. So you got this universal law, which is the law of God. That's like there's all the major religions that you look at go back to this universal law. Like Hindu talks about Brahma. Christianity, when you don't read the Catholic version, but the, you know, King James one in its pure form, with in the untainted, fucked around with translation, talks about this invisible creator from which all things come. And every religion talks about this, and which creates laws, the law of love. Then from the law of love comes the common law, the common sense, which then comes laws of nature, which then comes, you know, things like that. So then in terms of the constitutions, which is like when a country creates a common agreement and things like that. Then you can see here common law, private law, and then you got the law of the land. And Shayla said it'd be good to hear. Yeah, no, I actually agree with you, Shayla. This is one of the problems that I found, because a lot of people aren't very convincing. My experience, a lot of people in this space, they mean well, they're not happy what's going on, but by and large, it's a little bit like the person who's made a bit of money on cryptos and bought a few things, and then they think they're a crypto millionaire overnight. And a lot of people teaching this stuff just don't know what they're doing. And like I said, I was fortunate. I'm very fortunate, because I've been trained as a lawyer, and I also got trained in the common law by the real deal. You know, guys who are actually operated off grid. They really did live off grid. They really lived the stuff. They didn't just, you know, teach at a seminar. Guys have been secret agents in governments, two of the guys, like very high up, and knew exactly how it worked. So yeah, most of what I hear is just, yeah, it just doesn't work in the real world. So, you know, some of what I'll share today will be great and exciting to hear, and some of it will be not so exciting, because some of it I'll debunk what people think works. Because something works and some things don't. And then we look below, the law of the sea, or the commercial law, is the maritime law, the law merchant, the UCC, where you've got the military, you've got the maritime law, martial law, dictatorships, we create statutes, corporations, things like that, and dead entities. So it's very interesting. And I mean, this is one of the things I'll have to teach in the course. There's so much depth to all this kind of stuff, like going into Howard Freeman's UCC connection and things like that. But yeah, we understand statutes, but yeah, you're a fiction and dead entity. In other words, you're actually dead to law. And as you know, a dead person has no right in courts. So technically, what most people don't realize is that they're living under this illusion that they've got rights when they actually don't, because of this thing, these dead entities that get created. And it's just crazy. Like, the more you look into it, the whole thing is an absolutely, you know, things like that. And yeah, the most embarrassing thing, Nikki says, when a group tried to warrant an arrest for a state premier. Yeah, look, it just starts to get really silly, because as I said to someone, look, I mean, even though this probably, I know the basis that they were doing it. In fact, there is a system called the abatement system, where you can, and habeas corpus and other stuff where you can do stuff. You're dealing with a situation where the foxes well and truly now own the chicken coop. So I said there's a better way of dealing with it than doing that when the whole system is basically owned by a corporate system now, and by and large people have consented to it now. If you actually look at what most people are living, they have consented to corporations' law without actually realizing they're doing it. So that's been one of the problems with doing that, even though there is ability to do that. And I have met one of the guys who trained me has done that before. They've actually done stuff successfully in that area in New Zealand. So it's just understanding, it's like there's so many steps we have to go through. It's a bit like me, you know, I'm doing pole dancing, for some of you know. That's my new hobby, and I'm doing all kinds of stuff, and everyone thinks I've got a complete fruitcake now, and I probably am. But, you know, it'd be like me trying to get up and dance like the top dancer in the whole state. I'd fall off and kill myself. So things go in steps and stages, and we're a long way from getting our sovereignty back and getting our state legal law system back. And the fact that we let governments come in and railroad and each other's citizens railroad each other into getting experimental needles tells you we have got a real problem. Yeah, Charlotte, the best people are fruitcakes. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You know, crazy men are much better than boring men, and crazy women are much more fun than boring ones. So there you go. But so, yeah, on a serious note, you've got this stuff here, martial law versus common law. So, yeah, Alice in Wonderland actually said to the Mad Hatter, when he said, am I crazy? She goes, you're absolutely mad, you know. But he said, rest assured, he said, all the best people actually are, Alice said to the Mad Hatter. So let's give you a bit of an idea. So common law is actually innocent until proven guilty, whereas civil law is guilty until proven innocent. So ASIC and the ATO, for example, in Australia, are classic civil law jurisdictions because in ASIC, you're guilty until proven innocent pretty much with the way the tribunal system works when you go in for the examinations, and the ATO actually say in Section 190. So they're civil law jurisdictions. So in theory, in ancient common law and maritime law, the ATO is an optional entity for you to engage with. Now, of course, they've well and truly had enough agents and systems and contracts and enslavements and ABNs and TFNs and director's ID and super guarantees and child support, and they've got their little fingers and like into every little aspect of society. So you pretty much are all contracted in, just about people are whether they like it or not. And that's how, but really that actually is not something that's allowed to be done in common law. But like I said, again, we are fairly far away from being able to do that. So things like that. So yeah, so basically this is what you're dealing with, the civil law and common law. So martial law is a really, look, it's meant to exist for the military. So when martial law was created, it was to overcome a fairly obvious problem of having common law in the military. Like imagine you got an army together and you're going out to fight and you got people saying, oh yeah, I got my sovereign right. I don't feel like fighting today. You know, I just feel like smoking some weed and kind of, you know, hooking up with, you know, with a chick, and then I'll kind of join in when I get a chance, and I'm feeling a bit out of breath anyway, and I just want to do some yoga. And you're about to go and fight Afghanistan in the middle, and they're coming at you. So martial law was brought in to say, once you join the army by consent, and I emphasize by consent, you agree to come under a strict dictatorship system of order. If you play up, you get thrown in the brig, you don't get a trial, you know, you go in the brig first, and then they ask questions later to see if you're innocent. And you agree to that when you join it, you know, because they've got to keep order and they can't afford risks of people doing that. And so originally in martial law, when it was declared by country, it was at a time of extreme emergency because there really was a problem. Like let's say Japan's about to invade Australia and they're flying in there, and we know that. And that's one time the politicians should be declaring martial law to get everyone in order, get everyone ready, get everyone kind of under an orderly jurisdiction. So that's what martial law actually exists for. It's when a nation's in real trouble. Now, that's why I watched an absolute astonishment at what they were able to do the last few years when they declared a pretty much indefinite state of emergency and blatantly misused the powers of basically martial law. And Howard Freeman, in fact, goes further. He's an amazing guy, this dude. He pretty much explains US has been under martial law. Depending on how you look at it, he said certainly since 1938. So, in fact, if you want to go into this, you'll see even the flag that's flown in the courts is the military flag. So US is completely under martial law. And the whole idea that you got constitutional rights is kind of a little bit of a kind of semi-illusion is what Freeman explained. And when you go through to the Uniform Commercial Code, and which governs all international law, which governs everything and has done for a very, very long time. So who's in a little bit of shock from this? I'm just curious, who's a little bit like, wow, it's a little bit new for you? Anyone, or is everyone pretty aware? Yeah, okay, a couple of you. Yeah, heard this but never believed it. Yeah, look, I just say common law is common sense is what I tell people. So common sense means that you have to be able to consent to things. Like we've now agreed that arranged marriages and being forced into it isn't necessarily the way to go, you know, and that people should be given a choice about it. And legal systems and law is the same deal. But we're living in a centralized order where, look, problem is I could be here all day to explain the background of it. And so by and large, yeah, it's just a common sense just says that yeah, like basically a tax authority or anything else, you have to be able to consent to this kind of stuff, or consent to a country, or consent to a system. So things like that. So the biggest way, though, the one thing that Freeman says is that where many people get caught is, he said, the moment you take the benefits from the system, that shows you consented. So this is why when people are claiming like all kinds of rights during COVID and, you know, and yelling and going to protests, most of the people, I'm sitting there saying to someone, oh, I said, these people got no idea. They've actually, they're taking benefits from it. If you're taking benefits from the system, like government benefits and government grants and all kinds of other stuff, under ancient law, then yeah, you agreed to consented by taking benefits from it. So it's a very, and the problem, it's a very convoluted system, so to speak, very convoluted. Blackstone said, I've been trying to find the a meme for it, but I couldn't. But basically, Blackstone says in his commentaries, woe to the nation who sees governments bringing martial law in times of peace. In other words, it's only meant for really bad situations. It's not meant to be used to oppress its citizens, like what's going on. So, as Blackstone points out, he says the Bible was always part of the common law of England. And that's why, if you actually look, one of the things that's been a big thing is to try and discredit the Bible or whatever else. So keep in mind, I'm not saying I'm some religious guy. I'm a lover of the Hindu teachings. I taught yesterday on the Bhagavad Gita. It's an amazing book. I love a lot of the Buddhist teachings. I revere a lot of the religions when you get to the heart of them and get away from the stupidity of the organizations that many of them get up to. But the actual teachings of the sacred writings, I'm a lover of this stuff. And the Bible is one of the best books you can ever read. And I was very fortunate growing up in a church that taught me the King James Bible heavily before they pretty much changed all the translations in this kind of committee to try and knock it out many years ago, back in 1975. I was taught the correct version of it, and I managed to get hold of one. So when of course, as soon as I joined I was in this underground movement with secret agents, said like, man, you got an advantage, because they said, you need to learn the Bible. So they said, do you know much about the Bible? I said, well, no, really well. I said, I grew up with it and I studied it heavily and things like that. So that's why I found common law legal rights really straightforward compared to a lot of others as well, because I actually knew the Bible really well. So yeah, state of emergency is martial law. So basically, if you really want to do this and understand more about it, you want to actually make sure you got a proper King James Bible or something like that. And the 10 Commandments and things like that are very much part of the law. And there's a bit of a clue here in the scroll of Malachi, where he says, remember the law of Moses, which I commanded. So the law of Moses is the foundation, and Blackstone's commentaries make that very clear. If you read the Magna Carta, it goes to Almighty God. You read the Constitution of Australia, it's Almighty God. So and then people try and claim common law rights, but they go away from that. And again, I'm not talking about anything to do with a particular religion. If we lived in India, we'd be probably looking at the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads or some other books. If we were living somewhere else, we'd be using something else. Now, there's various religions that really reflect their creator very well. The one thing they all agree on is this universal creator, this Almighty God, from which all natural law or universal law, and from which it comes from. And we live by this universal law, the law of love. I mean, I don't want to steal money from you guys. I mean, if I'm charging you for services, I want to deliver to you. You don't want me to rip you off. You know, you don't want me to get up there and use some kind of system to get out of it. So universal law of God, is really good. And that's why I said, if you looked at the Dark Ages, the biggest thing that they did in the Dark Ages for 900 years was keep the sacred books away from the people, the Bible and various other books. And they're really trying to do it again. So you've got to make sure you get empowered, things like that in this area. So yeah, I don't like any King James Bibles after 1975. In fact, preferably, I like even earlier. I mean, mine's a 1956 book, Cambridge Press one. I even managed to get a much older one as well. So yeah, the older the better is the rule. Magna Carta, again, it really does all that and acknowledges rights. You would probably know that the Bible still is used in court. And if you really want to get your head messed around with, it's in the Masonic Lodge, which basically control most of our courts and most of our legal system. And I can remember they used this book. most of all these secret religions that I've come across and occultic, they use it heavily because they know that's the basis of the legal system, and they know it's the basis of a lot of the esoteric mysteries. The books of Chronicles have some of the best sacred geometry wisdom you'll ever read in your life about the power of the lotus petals, and in the sacred kind of temple. And the sacred temple pattern is still used in energetic grid building by many mystery schools and things like that in the Masonic Lodge. So if you want to actually read some of the temple building architecture, there's an exact system for energetic vortexes. It's crazy. And you can see why they've been absolutely adamant to keep this from the people, because like in the Dark Ages, and because the last thing that groups like this want is the people to get empowered. And there's a couple of reasons. One that's a very, very bad reason, and one that's a slightly good reason. The very, very bad reason is, of course, to enslave, to control, and do this kind of stuff. The slightly good reason is most people aren't worthy of sacred knowledge. And in fact, mystery schools do that deliberately. Jesus, Buddha, Pythagoras, Krishna were very selective about their shared things. I mean, most people, I think you'd all agree, are really quite foolish people. And they're like giving a kid a cannon to play with. I mean, he or she will blow someone up. So, you've really got to be worthy to kind of learn this and be at a mature place where you're actually ready to take responsibility and learn stuff and take it seriously and actually use it, and things like that. So, yeah, I buy secondhand bookstores, Lisa. I always go to Elizabeth's to look around because people are often offloading their Bibles or estates. So I just go down to secondhand bookstores and find them in there. There's a great one here in Isaiah. There's a great one here that summarizes the legal system and enslavement really, really well in this particular book of Isaiah. So it says here that, so I'll just actually read it to you. And unless you understand ancient symbology and metaphors, it won't make sense to you. But I remember when I read all this kind of stuff years ago, knowing the Bible and learnt this stuff, I was just blown away. So it talks about where is the scribe and the receiver. So generally in ancient Assyrian times, this is referring to Assyrian culture and oppression that was being done upon civilization, similar to what the one world governments are doing today. It basically talks about that you will erase a state of consciousness where you will actually no longer see the tax collectors. You won't any see them. In other words, you realize it's all an illusion and none of them apply to you anymore. And I remember when I first read this, I was like, from that day on, I started saying, none of this applies to me. And that's one of the first things you got to actually do is implement this stuff on the strawman and that in your way of thinking. Because if you don't get it in your way of thinking, it's all this head knowledge, you'll get carrots put up your ass so fast you won't know it hit you. And the governments will just be after you and, doing all kinds of shit to you. So you've really got to make sure that you're really, 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 really empowered, so to speak, when you're doing this kind of stuff and getting yourself really empowered. So, and then this is the one here. This is a really big clue. You will no longer see a fierce people of a deeper speech and a stammering tongue that you can't understand. How many of you get very confused by the stammering tongue of legalese in statutes and mandates? Who would try and read mandates and statutes like government laws and you go like, ugh. Yeah, and the answer would be all of you. Yeah, and that's why Jesus actually said in the Bible, woe to you lawyers, you wicked people, because you have the keys to the kingdom of heaven and you kept them from the people. Because what he was saying to them is, you know how it works. You know that the pen is mightier than the sword. And you motherfuckers have basically kept your knowledge and use it to enslave people. You guys are really bad, So yeah, confuse people. Common law is common sense. In other words, if my friend is married to someone else, it's not really right of me to go and secretly have sex with my friend's wife. That's just not very nice to my friend. That's not very nice to the covenant. There's all kinds of shit that says, well, that's just not good. If I'm basically like making a contract and you guys are paying me money and then I just kind of run off to the Bahamas, which would be pretty cool, and do pole dancing for the next 3 years, that's kind of you would not be very happy with me. That's common law. That's common sense. Someone breaks into my house, they're about to hurt my kids. I jump up, beat the shit out of them and kill them or do whatever. That makes common sense. Whereas we live in a system where, oh, no, you got this and you got to do this and got to do that, and everything becomes confusing. And that's what it's called Assyrian law. You confuse people then they kind of just go, oh, and they just kind of comply and don't get empowered. So the mandates were deliberately written in the most difficult, long-winded, bullshitty kind of language imaginable. So I was very glad I could read legalese. I've been trained, so I read it really, really well. So yeah, so Assyrian, basically Assyrian. So I'll type it here, Assyria. So yeah, so basically that's what it talks about there. And then it sort of talks about here that you'll see admiralty law, because it says that you'll no longer see a galley with oars. And a galley with oars in that time was basically a warship. So it's kind of freaky when you read this. It's like, this is like, you know, so kind of esoteric, symbolic, prophetic or whatever. But it basically says you won't see that sort of stuff anymore, you know. So the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. And in the Neville Goddard's teaching about the Lord, think of the Lord as the higher mind, the everlasting creator, the higher mind, the higher intelligence of their creator. In other words, getting back to the common law, to the natural law, to the law of God, the universal law. So that's how I deal with legalese. I always go back to universal law. So I said, for example, in the mandates, I said, well, obviously under universal law, no one's got any right to tell me what blooming needle to put into my body. So those mandates do not apply to me whatsoever. And that was it. That never crossed my mind. I mean, my next thing was, okay, now how do I navigate the legalese? So then I read the mandates, and I knew that under Uniform Commercial Code and the 10 Maxims of Commercial Law, all laws must have a remedy. So I thought there has to be a remedy. Sure enough, there was exemptions from the vaccine, exemption from masks, exemptions from every mandate. I went bang, 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 and got on with life, and none of that applied to me by using the exemptions correctly. So again, the pen is mightier than the sword. So you can see this here. So it's really powerful stuff when you understand this. So can you use this to escape legal mandates? And the answer is yes and no. Because yeah, you've got to actually know who you are. This is one of the first things they emphasized when I was working with the off-the-grid guys who taught me, and I was enrolled in common law, you know, sovereignty courses with these guys. They all kept saying to me, you've got to know it. You've got to know it deep within you. You've got to have it cemented in you. You've got to know who you are. You've got to know that you're a sovereign child of God. You know, you've got to know that, they said to me. And by the way, none of these guys went to church. They all thought churches were all part of the problem in the system, and most of them, unfortunately, are. And they agreed with me. They said churches are actually meant to be the arbiter of society. They're meant to be a checks and balance. A correct church in society, like what happened with Florida. I mean, Florida got the lockdowns all stopped, and they've been the gold standard for freedom. But what people don't know was the churches pushed back heavily in 2020 when Florida went apeshit and started putting lockdowns, and many pastors went to jail for it. And they just told their flock of sheep, they said, basically, you know, you just keep praying, keep going to church, ignore them. No government can tell the children of God whether they can, you know, worship God. You know, they can basically go and take a hike. And within about a month, the sheriff apologized profusely. They dropped all the mandates and Florida stayed mandate free. But it's because the church did this bloody job and provided checks and balance, which they're not doing anymore. They just, in Australia, they become a voice of the system, and if anything, supporting it. So anyway, don't get me started on that one. But yeah, so they weren't big fans of churches by and large, but they were big fans of, you know, knowing who you are and that you are a child of God, and knowing that there's an order of creation where you know that God's law is higher than government law. Now, in saying that, that does also mean with sovereignty comes responsibility, which means you do have to acknowledge a higher God. It doesn't mean that you've got to go, hey, I'm going to join a church and become a muppet, or, you know, I'm not saying, I mean, I know some of my very best friends go to churches and they're excellent people. So I'm talking about the church system by and large in Australia, which by and large is just unfortunately well and truly lost its way. But yeah, look, it's basically having that knowledge of that connection of your ultimate sovereign responsibility to a higher God, a higher councils, to your fellow citizens, and knowing that ultimately the power of God or kingdom of God is within you. In other words, you live that, and you can listen to that and don't need anyone outside of you to tell you what is true for you. It's like, you know, unless it goes against higher law, so to speak. So I remember how I parented my kids was my rule was a huge, broad boundary, but if you went outside the boundary, you're in serious shit. And that's how the best way to describe universal or common law. I mean, God's law is very broad. It gives a lot of freedom. But if you go outside it, you're in deep shit. So that's the best way to think of it. So once you know what's lawful, which means higher law-based rather than government statute corporation-based, you start to realize that all this stuff. I can remember a friend asked me years ago when I was running a bit of a radical awakened church, and you can only imagine how radical my church was. Most people wouldn't come to it, and most pastors wouldn't go near me. But this couple said to me, "Can you actually marry us?" I said, "Of course I can." They said, "You're a licensed celebrant, aren't you?" I said, "No." I said, "Don't need to be." I said, "Since when?" I said, "A license is permission to break the law." And I'm saying, since when is it illegal to get married? Married is a natural act of God to commit to someone you love. So I said, "Of course I can marry you." So I just married him and did that job. So yeah, it was really cool. So knowing the difference between lawful and legal and things like that. And it's quite funny, one of the things that people actually said to me was they think, "Oh my God, you never follow any laws, do?" I said, "Well, not stupid laws, no." But I said, one thing about common law and sovereignty is knowing what's called God's law and higher law. And one of the things, for example, where I disagreed with a lot of my friends, for example, in West Australia where I live, they closed the borders quite early when viruses hit. And I actually said, I actually understand why they did that. And I said, the reason why is because I said in all pandemic or any kind of things in history, the first thing they always did was shut the borders. Now I'm saying, obviously we know the whole thing's a big, hoo-ha just to take over and take away rights. But, 75% of the population I believe it's real right now. So right now, this actually is a law that makes sense because you're containing things until you work out what's going on. Now, obviously, there are many other violations that happen in the meantime. So the important thing is to know lawful and legal, what's common sense and what's not common sense and things like that. So the order of creation that I live my life by is this, God's law creates man, creates government, creates persons. So one of the things I was told in my training was, who is the master if he's a public servant? So I'll give you food for thought on that one. If they're public servants, who is their master? And I'll give you a clue. The answer is in the question, public servants. So it's really interesting as you start to find your power. And they're enslaved to their masters. Yes, Nadine, us. And not the elite. So they got no blooming right to be going ahead, bringing in new world orders and basically the kind of crap they're doing. They just don't. And they're not allowed to do that. But by bringing in a corporate system, and unfortunately, if you actually go and have a look at what's been done and the way they've moved titles, officers over to an offshore corporation away from the Crown, most legislation, they've moved away from the word state and they've made state a person or corporation rather than the Crown, which is a public trust. So by and large, in the last 20 years, all laws have been moved over into corporate law, which has been owned by offshore corporations and registered over in Washington. So it's tricky now. It's very tricky. That's why I said yes and no. In theory, yes, you can do this, but in real life, it's tricky now because so much of things have been turned into corporate law, and so many of us unknowingly have corporate ties and benefits to the system. So it's just got to realize that it's tricky. So people ask me, can I renounce my, birth certificate or whatever else? Now, again, in theory, a birth certificate, it's kind of it's effectively creating you as an entity and things like that. In practice, as I tell people, I've looked into this myself. In theory, you don't have to have one, but in practice, it's very hard not to get one of these done, and good luck functioning without one of these things. So personally, I like to pick my battles. I think in theory, there should be a different system of births than the current birth system. The one thing I did notice was historically births were registered as well as deaths. So this is not really a new thing in form of control. Registering births and deaths through almost every society I could find was a normal thing. So that's why I'm less concerned about this than anything else. So you can do it, but I think that you got to pick your battles, and in practice, it's just almost unsustainable. So the biggest thing I like to encourage people is to first find your real true power and actually do and get back to what I've shown you here and really get this matrix drummed into you and learn this power. I mean, for example, the census, I really found it difficult to find a remedy around it. There was, but it was difficult. So I had to go right back to common law and use this. I had to use this matrix, and it worked for me. You know, I use this particular thing to get out of that sort of stuff. I also use this with voting. I decided that I just personally, for me, had no interest in participating in it. I mean, I know people say voting is important, and it probably is. I just thought if I feel like voting, I'll turn up and vote. If I'm not, I won't. So they tried to find me. I just used this as well as had a look at the statutes, found the remedy, and got out of it. So you can just about get out of anything when you actually know how it actually works and things like that. So that's why we're going to be doing this common law course as soon as possible, just to really start training people, because obviously today we can only give some awareness as to how it works. Some, of course, say to me about the solution to banking is decentralizing privacy coins, crypto. Look, in principle, my answer to that is yes, I can see digital the way of the future. I will admit this worries me. There's some things I can sit here and give clear answers. Some things I'm a bit worried by this one. And the reason why is that cryptos, all my discussion with IT experts and hackers, is that it's well and truly tracked, no matter what anyone says. And if governments get up and announce a centralized coin and ban any other cryptos as currency, it's hard to really see people pushing back against that. You know, I think that people will kind of just go onto the central coin. So I'm a little bit unsure how to deal with this one. I think the answers lie somewhere in creating a truly, you know, decentralized, some kind of like monetary system that you almost go into communities. What I see as the answer at this stage is forming what I call small communities, or like what was predicted, a sovereign individual, where you start to create your own currency. You start to get good at barter. Barter, I think, is really good. Going back to barter with people that you know well and that you do mutual business, finding ways to do that. I think that's one way. I think for now, digital coins have a place. The problem with cryptos is a really good expert told me, who I knew and trusted, he said it's still very early. I mean, it's good for blockchain for certain things, but we saw the recent crash, like BlockFi, you know, all these ones that people going into. I just wasn't going into them. It's just too early. You know, it's just, there's still too much to be worked out. There's still too much to be seen what governments are going to do for my liking. So I do use cryptos. I use Bitcoin and others, but I think there's more research that's got to be done into this one. And I think for now I use a lot of bartering. I do use crypto, but I'm really looking at trying to find a solution that will cover this, because right now I do think that having separate systems of some kind is going to be necessary to get away from the social credit system. There's no question there will be. But right now, what's out there, I haven't found anything yet that really I'm convinced is the answer and will take enough acceptance. And the final thing is private trusts and foundations, which is a very common way that people are using to go around about it. And basically what a private foundation does, it's a charitable organization between two consent parties, not government registered. Now, to be clear, there's no question that you can do that. You know, there's no necessity to get it registered. And they become very popular for asset protection reasons. Is one thing. The fact that they're private and they're not registered with the government. I have used these before. I'll explain more about it shortly. The big challenge that you've got to realize is that, like anything, you can have something that's good, but then you get people who just don't know what they're talking about, who just espouse stupidity. And it really frustrated me. A number of people that bought these and then would come to me and tell me stuff. And I'd say, and when they'd be grilling me for my opinion, I'd be trying to avoid giving it to them and finding it so, well, so they're telling you that these things are tax exempt. Well, that's fine. I said, in principle, I agree with you. But I'm saying, are you also asking me if the ATO agree with it's exempt? They said, yeah. I said, well, they don't. And you're like, well, the people that told me it's tax exempt. I'm saying, yeah. At common law, I agree. I think it is tax exempt at common law because foundations and charities are. But the ATO passed legislation saying that unless you've got your foundation endorsed with us, we don't accept it as tax exempt. They've said that. They've passed laws to that effect. So I'm saying every time that anyone's gone to court, they've lost on this. So I'm saying if you're doing it, you just got to hope you don't get caught, or you got to be willing to be a martyr and stand for your cause. And that's the biggest thing I say. There's no question. I mean, I ran a church once through a private foundation years ago, and the ATO at some stage rang me about something, and then they asked me why I wasn't registered. They said, "You realise you've got to pay tax?" I said, "No, I don't." They said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Because I'm a son of God, and the sons of God are free from tax. It's in the Bible." And you could see the girl didn't know what to say. And she goes, "Well, yeah, but you still got to do it." I said, "No, I don't." I said, "God's law is higher than your law." So I said, "I won't be doing it anyway. Thanks for your time," and hung up on them. And just got on with the church and kept running it. And but then after about a year or two, I started to realize, I thought, well, if I end up getting my church registered in the public, as long as they give me everything that I get in the private, I'm going to go along with it. So I actually did that. I ended up registering my foundation as a public church. I got them to agree. I actually put a clause in my foundation stating that provided they accepted that the law, the natural universal laws and laws of God were higher than basically government law, that was fine. And if there's any conflict, that law would provide. But otherwise, provided they obeyed God's law, I'd happily comply with their rules. And actually accepted it and approved it. Who think that's pretty cool and pretty sexy? Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? Who thinks I'm sexy, by the way? Now that you know I'm a pole dancer, I can do that. So come on, who thinks I'm sexy? You get really good brownie points if you think I'm sexy. Oh, Shayla, you're the best. Oh, Marguerite, yeah, look, this is great. Shayla always says it. What can I say? Absolutely, you'll have to be my favorite now. So, and shameless. Yeah, no, my sons actually said to me, "You're a complete embarrassment. You're the most shameless person I've ever met in my life." And they said, but that's why people like coming to your webinars. They said, "We don't know anyone else who just openly share these half-naked pole dancing videos all over social media, send them everywhere, and just do it." They said, "You have absolutely many major problems." So I just laughed about that and I said, "Yeah, you probably got a point there." So the main thing is private foundation is that this argument is that, and look, I think the argument is probably correct, as I've said to you. The issue and the drawback of this whole thing is that the current system, the government don't accept that. So as long as you actually are aware of that, but you're fighting for a cause you believe in, that's when it works. I personally found that public foundations work better because right now in Australia, the public foundations law is absolutely brilliant. It's really good. You can just about get all the same benefits from a private foundation with only a couple of things you miss out on as you can at a public and private. And it's all legitimate and accepted by the ATO. And that's why most of the rich don't pay a lot of tax. That's what they do. So just keep in mind that if you are going to do a private foundation, basically, then just be mindful of the fact that, if you're going to do it, there's a few things to know before you commit, that you're not viewed the same, you're not basically viewed the same as a public foundation. And anyone who's been audited on this and have lost have been smacked by the ATO. They've won every time. Now, I'm saying that they don't do it very often, but if you happen to be on your lucky buggers, you've got a problem. So the foxes may have no right to, eat the chickens or whatever else, but will they actually listen to you if you go and tell them that? And the answer is probably not. The tax law, as I said here, is that the foundation must actually be endorsed, which means the ATO must say, "Hey, we accept it." So that means if they take you to court under the tax law, they're going to hold, because you're not endorsed, it doesn't actually apply. So in Australia, you've got to get Charities Commissioner approval and you've got to get ATO approval. And it's really quite straightforward. I mean, some of you have done it with us, so to speak. But so it really isn't that bad, but you just have to be aware that that's what the law actually requires right now. So it's all well and good to say in theory what the law is, just make sure you realize what the admiralty, like commercial law, actually says. So you're essentially saying you don't believe the government has any jurisdiction whatsoever to go after you. Now, keep in mind, we're not going to agree with that. So I've always found it better to take that position internally, but then find ways as much as possible to work within the system. And only where you really have got no way around it, you take a stand on something. That's my basic rule. So it's not how the government see things in practice. So it's really, really, really important, so to speak. So you're basically saying to the government, you have no jurisdiction, come and get me if you think differently. And you've got to just make sure you know what you're doing if you do that. So it's your, of course, ultimately though, it's your choice what you do with that kind of stuff. You just need to basically know how the system actually works. So yeah, it's your choice. I personally, we don't really do them as like, if people want to set up private foundations, there's plenty of people out there doing it. We say, yeah, go for it if that's what you believe in. We just don't do it because I don't see the point of doing it. I like to set up things I know actually work. Private foundations work in theory, but in practice, if the government looks at them. So we don't do it. We say, look, if you believe in it enough, go and see one of the many people out there who set one of them up and go from there. So that's our stance. But I do emphasize that in theory, private foundations do work. I don't have a problem with that. They do actually work, and I've used them before. But in practice, they're difficult, and you've really got to be strong. You know, like you probably worked out by now, I've got balls of steel. You know, I said to the ATO, like, for me to say that, I just knew what my rights were for my time in the underground movement. But unless you're really at a state of absolute power and certainty in who you are, you're really better off to kind of do it a different way and things like that. And like, that's why I chose in the whole, mandates period. I really didn't run around yelling and screaming and saying, these are my rights. I just I read the mandates, used my power, common law, legal rights, and I pretty much just got myself my passes to go through the system and be left alone. So that's the thing. The other problem we've got too is that the current system, the bloomin' population, they go along with it. I mean, most of the coercion wasn't really done as much by the government as people actually think. If you look back, it was the citizens, it was the corporations, it was insurance companies, it was a business, it was the family guilt trips, it was the friend guilt trip. I mean, it was diabolical. I was miles more upset with that than I was with the governments, because governments, on pure statistical polling facts, were doing what the majority wanted. Doesn't make it right, but they were doing what the majority wanted. So that was my big problem with the whole thing. Big problem for me. So yeah, Nikki's a nurse. I was ashamed at my colleagues. Yeah, I was just horrified, like absolutely horrified. I mean, not completely. I mean, you got to remember that our populations have burnt women at the stake for being herbalists and called them witches. They've arrested and beaten the shit out of black people just because of their color, and segregated them from shops, and then endorsed it to keep their businesses going 60 years ago, as recently as 60 years ago. And a guy got shot for basically trying to say you shouldn't do that. Guy called Martin Luther King, who you may have heard of. 55 years ago, people were getting arrested because they said, we want to go to Vietnam and kill innocent Asian people just because the US don't like them. I mean, that's the population that we come and will live in, but yeah, that's, so this didn't completely surprise me. And what I'm really hoping is that we really are getting a waking up, and we are, look, I'm seeing it more. My observation now, and I'm a little bit of a pessimist about this, but I was saying to someone, there's no doubt in WA, more than 50% now are not happy with what's happened. I'm convinced of that. I reckon about 60 to 65%, maybe about 60%, is really not happy about what's happened. 60 to 65%, and they see there's been a real problem, and they just need some guidance to get out of it. That's why we're doing these webinars, because we want to empower and get to be 60, 65% while they're fresh, they're angry, they're hurting, and they can listen. So yeah, please get the word out and make sure you let your friends know about these webinars. Like I said, the vision of our club is to give 99% free education, 1% paid, to those who want to really get more advanced education and, get more specialized help. But the basic kind of starter points to awaken people, we do it for free, and Jen, thank you, Jen, so much. Jen loves what we're doing. Yeah, look, it feels good. And Jesus said it's better to give than receive. And I agree with it. I agree with the guy. It's good. I don't know about you or most of you, but it's a good feeling when you give money to a homeless person and, or help people out. It feels damn good. So yeah, look, by getting the word out, letting people get empowered. Imagine if we can really get our nation really empowered over the next few years. I mean, I reckon we can You just don't know what we can do before they try and bring in their appalling digital microchipping shit. I reckon we can stop it. It's crazy that sound. I do actually think we can, but we're just going to have to be committed, work hard, keep educating, keep getting the word out, and keep being smart about it and not being stupid. So, so just imagine what they can do if they target anyone, who's going against this environment. Just imagine what they can do. So this is really a good time to awaken and come along to our common law course when we do it. We do a free common law training to get you started if you want to watch a little bit about our government system, things like that. I'll show you that at the end. So things like that. It's really good, So very, very good. And it's great to see how everyone's just really awakening and taking power over their life. I really like that. So in terms of what the alternatives are, in terms of moving forward, in terms of private foundations, really, like I mentioned, there's public foundations. You can always do that. And you can look into that, or you can always reach out to us if you want to set up one of the public foundations, churches, education, mental health. Public benevolence just means mental health and, poverty relief kind of stuff, and go from there. And finally, in terms of the whole straw man, things like that, I like this scripture in the Bible. Just come out of the system. In other words, pull out, just get out of it and don't partake in the collapse as it happens. Shayla says pole dancing foundation. Yeah, I did have an idea, Shayla, of a tantric temple of priestesses that was a church, which had pole dancers and that. And I actually said to one of my friends once, who's a stripper, I said to her, you realize you guys could set up a whole temple and be tax-free if you were confident enough to do it. So yeah, it made me laugh about it. So yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. So before I take questions, so what you can do is website here, if you're not a free member or your friends aren't a free member, make sure they become one, because we've got really good, and we're not going to spam them and try and sell the fuck out of them. The Global Wealth Club, we've got a really good section, as you'll see here, in free trainings. And we've really broken this down to make it basic. There's the starting your journey. We've got your common law rights here, which just goes a little bit more into, day-to-day stuff, like about your government, how our government really works, the state of emergencies, and it even covers about a 2-hour introductory series on writing legal notices just to get you started. So by the time you come to the course, you've got a little bit of basic stuff ready to go if you decide to come. The economic collapse, creating an income. We've got some free trainings here, just from really good people, friends of mine to help. This one's about to come. This has got to be a really good one. The basics of financial income to get sovereign, because you're going to need to be sovereign so the government can't coerce and control. And for those who want to keep their wealth a bit more advanced about foundations, if you want to learn about foundations, we've got some stuff in here, introduction, protect your assets from the government, minimize your taxes. So you just got to basically enroll as a member, which is just your name and email. We don't spam you with crap. Like I said, we really want to actually give good content and grow a huge, huge community where we help a lot of people. So, okay, so I hope that helps you all to understand. And really from here, any questions are welcome. So Alan says, I feel like the old dog trying to learn new tricks of this. Is it possible to have something put together for our kids? Yeah, no, look, we've done youth empowerment stuff, Alan. And yeah, no, look, Edward, I don't know if Edward's listening, my son, but if you are Edward, yeah, this could be a good thing. But if we do the other one, that we can have a separate thing for kids, where you can be like, if people have got kids who want to get involved, we can do a separate thing for children. Because I think one of the things that I remember in a common law school, they had a song which went, a child who knows their common law rights will do well in life. And then it was like, a child who doesn't know their common law rights, they're vulnerable to addiction, coercion, divorce, and suicide. And that was a song we used to sing, the mantra, every single week at our course. But how chilling is that now? Like, those who don't know their common law rights are vulnerable to addiction, coercion, divorce, and suicide. Like coercion, because you don't have the boundaries to stand up. Divorce, because you don't have the strength to build a good relationship or or the knowledge. Suicide because you don't think you can cope anymore. Addiction because you want to escape your pain of feeling powerless. So, Glenn, can you have a public foundation focused on mental health similar to spiritual church? You certainly can. Yes, Glenn. It's a public benevolent institution is the answer. So the answer is yes, you certainly can. I'm setting one up for a friend right now. So public foundations are for charitable philanthropic purpose, Cynthia. So that's the purpose of it. So some great comments. Thank you so much from Margarita. Keen to do the course. That's awesome. That'd be great to see you there and everyone else. And thank you, Vicky, and thank you, Angie, and yeah, thank you, Nikki. So things like that. So any other final questions? Yeah, well, in fact, as I said to James, I said, my big aim next is, who knows, I might start setting up online poll shows or start, offering the charge for pole dancing. And hey, it can be the pole dancing accountant. In fact, I'm going to be releasing some tips, like financial tips, with me hanging on the pole with my pole dancing teacher. So yeah, just completely ridiculous reels and things about to be releasing, like financial tips, tax tips with me doing that. So there you go. So Colin asked, what's your stance on the Magna Carta? Oh, look, the Magna Carta is part of our law. It's a powerful document, Colin. It came into our law with the common law, but when it was done, almost being voluntarily legislated out by Admiralty now. So, the cost of course, when, how long? Cost, we're still working it out, Mina, because what we're going to do is have probably two parts. There'll be those who just do the first kind of half-day workshop and then the 13 weeks. Those who do that and also do the, come to the one-day event. So, not sure. It's going to really be anything between, I want to keep it pretty affordable, So, yeah, look, it's not going to be, I want to make sure it's exceptional value for 3 months. And if we get a large enough people, we can do that. So, Lisa, will it be difficult or easy? Well, no, look, anything new is difficult, but I'm going to be breaking it down and making it really simple. I'm not going to be overwhelming you, Lisa. It'll be simple stuff like, simple things like how do you deal with school bullying to stop it within 24 hours, like with a simple letter? And how do you write your letter to make sure that the school will move their ass? Who'd be interested in that, for example, or to stop your boss straight away? Like just a very simple legal letter that will instantly stop bullying. Even if you don't have kids, you can then do this to help people who do have kids getting bullied. I used to do this as a little bit of a pro bono thing to help single mothers who are getting kids bullied, and things like that. So yeah, Marguerite knows people would be keen. Yeah, look, spread the word, Marguerite. You definitely want to do that. And Kate, definitely, yeah, look. And also things like debt collectors. What if you're getting harassed by a debt collector, like constantly? What if you're getting letters? What if you're being called? And things like that. Absolutely, yeah. Look, you want to know your rights. So yeah, Glenn, my understanding of a difference between a church and a PBI is you can more tax effectively take money out of a church than a PBI. Yes and no. You can in certain things you can't. They've both got their pros and cons, Glenn, but yes, you're on the right track, man. Jeremy, how can you use it to stay out of the digital identity and social credit system? Yeah, look, the short answer is it's doable, but it's a whole change in thinking. The biggest thing with common law and this kind of stuff is you absolutely have to, everything starts here. Once you get this side sorted out, the rest of it comes together. That's my comment on that one. You start to create backup plans and backup ways of dealing with things and things like that. So thanks, James. Love your teachings back in Jamie McIntyre's. Oh yeah, no, great to see you again, James. Always enjoyed talking to you too at events. So it's good to see some of my old friends turning up here again. So Shayla, how do you stay so sexy and youthful? What's your secret? Look, pole dancing and staying strong and fit is definitely one. But yeah, I eat really well. I make sure I do lots of fun to stay childlike. I go and play video games. In the midst of all the craziness, I go to time zone sometimes and just, play down the clown and try and break records. I play video games. I also have flower essences and homeopathics, do spiritual energy clearing. And mantras are really good too. I do daily mantras, and it's true. When you're empowered, you feel healthier and feel good. And every day I look at myself in the mirror and I say things like, man, you look hot, you look great. You know, you look young, you look great. And I always tell people I'm a 21-year-old in a slightly older body. So most people walk around saying I'm getting old. And then your body goes, and your body just hears what you say to it. So then your body goes, oh, okay, and starts getting old. And I'm convinced a lot of aging is the way we speak about ourselves, the fact we believe in it, and then what we do to our bodies, and things like that. So there's many factors to anti-aging, but that's a big one, you know, as well as different supplements and intermittent fasting, and there's just many things, stuff like that. So yeah, someone says we can claim our weight in gold investment, which is made with registered born. Is this bullshit? Makes all billionaires by now. If that's true, I'd be very happy. I hope they're right, Peter. That's all I can say on that. If they're right, I'll be very happy. And if they even go and do it and then show me how they did it, I'm in. I'll be going to get my $1 billion goal too. I've heard this kind of shit and I haven't had anyone show me how to do it yet. But I'm open-minded to anything. If they've actually done it, then tell them to contact me and let's teach people how to do it and let's go out and claim $1 billion. That's my answer to that one. Yeah, show me the money. Absolutely. Shayla karaoke. Mark already getting sexy all the time. Absolutely. Look, you say all the right things to me. So I have many runs of councils by Colin to issue me notices. Yeah, councils are a hard one to deal with. Even my friends in the underground movement used to deal with them. They said they're tough because they technically don't really have their lawful status, as Wayne Glue, who's a guy we know, shows. But again, it's the fox and the chickens argument. I mean, good luck, you know, that's all I can say. And the day someone can beat these guys, I'd be wrapped. So, okay, just sort of time. I'm going to have to end this. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you all. And I will see you all, you know, next time. Bye for now.